If you want to be great, you want to be the baddest motherfucker ever at what you do, you're going to be misunderstood by everybody because you're going to be so fucking obsessed and so driven to get there. And that's what it takes. You will never understand what is wrong with me. And that's why I'm so fucking glad you don't, because I'm in the right fucking spot. When people don't understand you anymore, you're in that spot of obsession and drive where people are like, what the fuck is wrong with this guy? I don't want to talk to you, man, because you're not going to get it. Don't want you to get it. Don't want you to get it.
Welcome to the Uncommon Life podcast. So, in episode 1, Rich Lewis and I kick things off with a conversation about how each of us are approaching our nutrition. We figured the best way to go about this would be to talk a bit about our short to mid-term goals, and then to follow that up with how each of us are approaching our nutrition to fit in with those goals. As you would expect, there are a few common threads between us, almost high-level principles of nutrition, but there's also a lot of uniqueness in how each of us goes about eating to achieve our goals. And that's actually half the battle, finding what works for you and what's going to help you be the most consistent. We hope you enjoy the first episode. If you have any feedback at all or suggestions of topics to cover in the future, we're all ears. All right, let's jump straight in. Cool. So today we'll talk about really our nutrition approach. And I think probably a good idea, like we spend a bit of time on each of us. One, talking a little bit what our near-term goals are. So let's say kind of like what our goals are over the next, say, month or two. And then also we'll talk about what is our kind of high-level approach to nutrition for trying to achieve those goals, like high-level kind of principles, foundational stuff. But then I think get into some of the detail of like what's unique to each of us as well. We'll cover that in some detail, and we'll go from there. Sound cool?
Sounds good.
Sounds good to me, man. Sounds good.
All right. Why don't we start with Rich?
Why not?
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, no worries. All right, cool. So I suppose like your original thing is like, what is the goal right now, and then how nutrition's feeding into it. So
yeah,
my goal for the next kind of 12 weeks, so I'm a week into this current cycle, and the term me using cycle will make more sense in a second, but my current goal in the next 12 weeks is to lean out. I'm really kind of focused at the moment on dropping quite a bit of body fat. And the next 12 weeks also include a kind of 10-day summer holiday. So I'll put that into my plan as well. But really would love to find myself in 12 weeks dropping kind of 2.5-3 kilos, and as much of that to be fat as possible. I'm realistic that some muscle will go with it, but weight training pretty heavily, try and keep the strength up to kind of try and reduce the amount of muscle loss. So that's kind of really what the goal is to drop as much body fat and lean out before I get into kind of September, October, where I'll shift then much more into kind of going into maintenance, then into a surplus, as I spend kind of 6 months over summer really focused on strength and muscle gain. And so with that in mind, the nutrition right now is living in a deficit, and a fairly kind of healthy deficit at that, like to kind of keep on track. So I'm sitting around 15 to 20% below maintenance. Maintenance, as if people listening aren't really kind of figuring that out right now, for me, my maintenance is around 2,600. Like that's where I'd sit naturally. And so, I'm eating like 2,000 to 2,100 on a daily basis of calories here. And my macro components are heavily protein. But I do kind of like my carbs. So kind of it's like 40, 30, 30 fats and carbs. And that's really how I like my weekly averages to look. So if every week I can kind of finish with an average daily intake of circa 2,000 calories with around 40% protein, that's a good result for me on the nutrition side. And then, as we've discussed before, for me, it's all about whole foods, and I really try and avoid processed foods at all costs. And so I'm pretty high on that. I really only try to eat whole foods if possible. So that's me. And then, from I want that to be successful.
Hey,
I think about it. Yeah.
Just a quick one, just like for people listening, how do you know if you're eating 2,000 calories or 1,900 calories? Like, okay, without going into like gigantic amounts of detail, like, being able to kind of stick to that is probably crucial to success. So how do you actually do that?
Yeah, no, great question. Actually, right. You're always driving into detail. So I think the same as you, gents, and so many other people, but it took me a long time to transition. For me, I'm a massive advocate of calorie tracking. So, there's a couple of apps out there. I mean, for those looking, I used MyFitnessPal, which I think both of you gents still use. I'm now
Yeah.
using another one, which is called Macro Tracker, which is very, very similar. And effectively, it's part of my daily habits. Every time I eat something, I track it. I accept there's a little bit of like fluff, like it's not completely accurate, but if I go and have a banana, I put it in the app. If I have a main meal, I put it in the app. And I use that as a guidance. So I kind of help me understand how much I'm eating. And I've been doing that now for quite a long time. So now I have a really good grasp in general of how much things really kind of are from a calorie standpoint, where, if you like, you have to be a little bit sensible. If you go to a restaurant and it says there's 1,000 calories in something, the chances are it might be off, but it does try. And I use that as my kind of my method of tracking. And then, again, I say I'm in a deficit by 400 or 500. Realistically, I'm probably not that much in a deficit because I've probably got hidden calories that I'm consuming as well. But in general, as a theme, keeps me kind of on track. Keeps me comfortable. So yeah, I don't know about you, gents, but for me, like, calorie tracking has been one of the most important pieces of my nutrition journey. And beforehand, I think, I very, very clearly underestimated how many calories I was consuming on a daily basis. Like for quite a long time, it was only when I started really tracking, I started realizing that I was consuming 3,500 a day, and I thought I was consuming 2,500. It was like easily 1,000. Actually, when I don't track, which I very rarely now, but if I went on holiday and I wasn't tracking, I would just organically creep up. I couldn't even help it. I would think I was eating 2,500 and I'd be 3,500 every time. So for me, it's a tool to keep my discipline and keep me on track.
But that sounds normal to you, right? To track calories. Like, that sounds insane to most people. Every single day, everything you eat gets tracked. Right? I don't know if you could describe, like, because I think, like, there's a shared opinion between the three of us that, like, once you get used to it, it isn't as insane as it sounds, right? It's not as hard as it sounds.
I mean, it's nuts,
insane,
really, if you think about it.
But to most people, probably thinking like, shit, that would take like 2 hours to do a day. Like, how can you? That's a full-time job to track everything, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think I remember thinking about this before getting used to it and being like, that's nuts. I'm never doing that. That's ridiculous. Why on earth would you do that? Like, I understand food, and I think as you have this naivety, as with many topics, when you think you understand something, and you're like, okay, yeah, look, I know how many calories are in that pasta, or I look at the back of the packet and it tells me in my, I don't know, let's just say an old habit of mine used to have like cereal in the morning for the last like 15, 20 years until I realized. And so you look at the back of the packet and look, there's only 150 grams in that bowl of cereal, and that, 150 calories in that bowl of cereal, and that will be it. However, what happens is when you start actually going through the method of tracking, you realize how wrong you are. It becomes natural that you have to, like that bowl of cereal you thought was 150 calories. Well, actually, it turns out that you actually had 3 lots of servings and you're missing the milk, and your little bowl of cereal you thought was 150 calories is actually 800 calories. And you're like, oh, yeah, solid. So some of it is a mental shift. For me, it was anyway, which is like, it opened my eyes to how naive I was. And then actually, the apps are so quick and easy to use. Like, it takes seconds. Like, I especially once it gets used to kind of the meals you eat. Like, I often have breakfast. I don't know. I have porridge a couple of days a week on weight training days. It's the same breakfast I have each time. It's already there, so it's like a one button press and it tracks it. And it's got barcode scanners, so if you got it's. For me, those apps are incredibly quick and easy to use. But more importantly, it allows me to just it facilitates me to be disciplined about how much I eat, because without it, frankly, I'm not. Like, I would just overeat, and I don't mean that in like I don't go and indulge. It just happens. So for me, it's been a game changer of keeping my nutrition under control, and I don't find it hassle now at all. And I'm so used to it. I would say it probably takes me 2 or 3 minutes a day. Like, it's that quick. And I don't know how you guys have got and how fast you guys put your stuff in, but it's just
same. 2 minutes, 2 minutes a day, because brings up all the same things. What I'd really love to know, actually, so you're having, say, 2,000, 2,100 calories a day, and I know you've mentioned before that you have a lot of protein, right? So is it about 200 grams of protein a day?
Yeah, about that.
What does that look like in terms of food for a whole day? So what would you have for breakfast? What would you have for lunch? What would you have for dinner? And do you weigh it out, or do you kind of like just eyeball it? Like, how do you know what that 2,100 calories is, and how do you make it up?
Well, I mean, I think there's probably 9 different podcast episodes in one question there.
Yeah.
But I think,
What are you going to eat
yeah,
today?
yeah. Well, so I suppose, I mean, for me, like I like to plan ahead, like as in it, one of the things I found to find success on the nutrition side for me has been to move from what I consider a standard way of eating like a couple of years ago, where you'd wake up, you'd have your breakfast, you'd go to work, you'd grab lunch, normally out and about, like that's the way it would work. You'd see whatever, a sandwich or a wrap or whatever's going, maybe a salad, and then you think you're healthy, moving towards salads, and then in the evening, you would just kind of, start putting meals together, and they would always, it would be a normal family life, right? The difference for me today is that I recognize that doesn't achieve my goals. And so instead, what I now do is I really try and plan the week out. Not to the nth degree of I know every single meal coming up, but I have a really good understanding of when I'm going out, specifically if I'm going out to like a restaurant with friends or with work colleagues or whatever, and I can plan against it, knowing that I need the freedom to be able to just eat like a normal person at that meal. And then I plan my other meals during the week to say, well, actually, that means that, the rest of the meals have to be generally to meet my macro goals, a meat, a fish, and some vegetables for dinner. Like that's generally kind of, what most meals would look like. And lunches will generally look like, depends again on what I'm doing. It might be a meat and fish and a salad, or a chicken salad, or eggs, or an omelette, or it'll be something. But the general goal for me is always protein in every single meal, and always make that the highest priority. Then my fruits and my veggies, and then my carbs. And my carbs generally will only come from kind of whole food sources. My carbs will only really be heavier on weight training days, because that's when I find I need it, for me personally. But I suppose it comes down to I have a plan, and then I use calorie tracking to achieve the plan. And that for me that's the nutrition change in the last kind of few years. And now it's so normal to me. I know I look like a weirdo for a lot of people, as you two also do, but it feels normal to me. So it doesn't take any. In fact, anything. You know what? It's less stressful than it used to be, because I know what's going on. I know what I know that my lunch today is a chicken salad, and I know for dinner I've got steak and veg. It's done. I haven't like prepped it, but it's in the fridge and it's done. So it's less stressful for me. Now the challenge is reality with the family. I often eat separately from the kids. So my wife and I will often eat separately from the kids. And if we're doing family meals, well then, again, I have to think that through a little bit more and adjust them slightly.
So your chicken salad, is that freshly made yourself? So do you get the chicken strips that you made, or do you cook up the chicken, or is it a chicken salad that's prepackaged?
Never prepackaged. Don't trust any of that. So no, I've got a chicken roasting in the oven.
Okay.
so no.
Okay, so you've actually got. So that's good to know. That's good to know. So that's interesting, because it's all around the time as well, right? The time and the prep and everything that people do to actually get it. So you've got a chicken roasting in the oven, and you're going to pop that in with some lettuce, tomato, avo, or is avo too calorie dense? What would it be? What would it look like?
Yeah, so I don't plan that far ahead. I have all of that in the house, and so it depends on the mood I'm in for that meal. Like, I don't measure it out. Like, I'm not. It will be more along the lines of, I've got the chicken roasting in the oven. I will take that out. I will then chunk it all up, get rid of the skin, and just like use kind of the breast meat and maybe a bit of leg meat, depends. The rest I will save for tomorrow, so that's prepped ready for tomorrow. And then I'll chuck in a bit of salad together, and I will add for my tracking. I'll add half an avocado, and I'll put half an avocado in, or I'll add like a handful of nuts, put a handful of nuts to the tracking. But that'll generally be it. Like I find it really like A, it's nice food, and B, it's very easy to do. Now that's, to be clear, only possible because I'm working from home today, and therefore it's easy to do. Whereas if I'm going out, and again, this is the planning point, and this is why it's so important to plan, is if I'm going out, well, then I will either fast, so I don't get myself caught in a situation where like I have to try and eat out somewhere, or I'll go to places where, I know that they do good, wholesome food that's well within my plan.
But I think what's like probably important to drag out there is that regardless of whether you're like going out and about or whether you're working from home, I would imagine that when you wake up, you pretty much know how your day is going to come together from a food perspective. Like you're not leaving anything to chance. Like that sounds pretty normal to you and the three of us, but I'm a hazard a guess that like 80% of people move through the day and are sort of figuring it out kind of ad hoc. I'll grab this. It depends where I am, right? It depends. Oh, I'll just go through the fridge. Oh, I'll grab that. And it's like, that gets you into pretty deep trouble quite quickly, right? But particularly, and it only gets you into deep trouble if you're actually trying to do something. If you're actually trying to stick to, eating a certain amount of food and a certain amount of macros, which is usually the key to actually making a change. So it's like, I think that's the, and Rich is probably stronger than me on this as well. I have a sense of what's going to happen today, but I think Rich doesn't really leave too much to chance at all, regardless of whether he's in his own house or whether he's out and about. He's already thinking about how he's going to mitigate it, what he's going to grab. Probably and I know this is true because I've had WhatsApp conversations with him, but he's Googling menus of places that he has to go for lunch and he's already thinking about how he's going to modify the meals. I mean, it sounds a bit mental, right? But like nothing is left to chance. And it's that preparation, I think, that makes a big difference.
If you've got a clear goal, which you have, you need to prep for it, right? And you need to do what you can to achieve it.
Yeah, and I think for me, I think we've discussed it, and obviously people listening won't be aware, but I had like a trigger point, right? I was kind of this autoimmune condition I was kind of diagnosed with a couple of years ago, meant that there was a load of food I suddenly just couldn't eat while I figured out what was kind of triggering certain things, and so I became pretty obsessed by ensuring that I was only eating certain things and avoiding certain things. And so that's where the menu behavior came in, because I don't anymore, but I used to struggle going out for lunches or dinners with work colleagues, which I used to do an awful lot as part of the job. And then like being the different one, like customizing the menu or being seen a bit strange, like being the odd one out. Now I don't care. Now I customize everything. I don't give a monkeys. But there was a period of time where I would struggle. So that's where that habit came from, which is, right, I'm going out for a meal. I'm going to this particular restaurant. Let me look at the menu. And some restaurants just do not cater for you if you want to eat in a good way, right? They're just loaded with oils and processed foods and crap. Some menus just have nothing decent or wholesome on. And that for me used to cause me a lot of problems, where now I kind of either just don't go or will ask them to customize the menu. Or if it's a family get together and you're going to go, let's say it was a pancake house, right? Well, you know what? I'm going to join in, but because I planned it, I can customize my other meals in the day around it. So, that's where I'd use tools like fasting or whatever, just to kind of manage it. So for me, like when we talk about nutrition, my goals, having a solid plan, super, super important to me. Like it's just not an option. There is always a plan. And then tracking the calories to ensure I deliver against the plan, which for me then becomes a game and I enjoy it. And I don't struggle with when people say willpower and I want to eat a dessert, I have none of that. Like I just don't, it's just not part of my daily life anymore.
On the tracking side, just in terms of sort of anybody listening that wants to make a practical step into tracking, it sounds pretty daunting, right? And yes, it has got easy for you. It takes 2 or 3 minutes a day, I think, for all of us. Like we generally eat the same things. Like we've made it easy for ourselves. But if somebody is listening that's never tracked their calories or even isn't actually that aware of like what sits underneath a calorie in terms of protein and carbs and fat, what would you suggest to them as a way of getting into it? Because you've had to build into getting there. Like what's the first step for someone?
So what I did to begin with, I don't know how you guys did it, and this sounds mad when I say it out loud, and I know you're going to joke. You took piss at me that was last week as well, but I'm going to do it anyway. First step one was, well, why? Like I couldn't really see the point in it. So what I did was just kind of go, well, for this week as an experiment, I'm just going to write down what I'm eating and get a feel for like, am I with my gut instinct close? So, I found the spreadsheet. I did have a spreadsheet, and
did you find it?
Yeah.
I searched.
I did.
Oh,
I
brilliant!
couldn't find it. Did I dream it or something?
No, you didn't dream it. So basically, I had a spreadsheet, and for a period of time, I would just go through and I'd write stuff down. I go, okay, well, look, this is what I've eaten, and here's actually what the calories are. So not my assumptions, like I would measure it or I'd look on the packet and I'd multiply it out and whatever else. And I just did that for a week to get, I did it longer than that, but let's just say a week to get a feel for what I was actually eating versus what I thought I was eating. And that was my trigger point, because then I realized how daft, and I thought I was really good and healthy. And then you got to the end of the week, you looked at it and you're like, wow, okay, I was wrong, and that was enough motivator for me then to kind of take it more seriously. And I think it was actually you, Daniel, that like, actually, you should try this app out. And I got into it. And honestly, within 3-4 days, it had just become a habit, and now I don't think I've missed a meal in, I don't know how, like a year. I don't know what it will be, and it's quick and easy. So I think for people thinking about it, and it is quite daunting. And by the way, I think it should be done in phases as well. Like I don't think it should be tomorrow I'm going to plan all my meals out and track all my calories and care about all my macros. I think that's really daft. I think you have to go step by step. I would say for me, step one was actually just writing down the food I'm going to eat this week. So I just get a sense for what percentage of that food is good food or bad food, because I think most people are pretty good at doing that. And when you look at it and you realize, well, hang on, in the next 7 days, I'm eating out 5 times. I've got 2 takeouts. And then you're surprised you're not making progress on your goals. It's like, well, you kind of realize like that takeout you had is probably 2,500 calories of shit, and it's loaded with all of the nonsense and oils and whatever else. That will destroy an entire week of progress. So unless you mitigate against it, right? And when maybe 1 a week is fine, even two a week, if you think about it, is fine. 3, you start managing it. But if you've got a week full of like 3 or 4 lunches out and 3 or 4 dinners out, you add a couple of drinks around it, and it's incredibly difficult, I think, then to make good progress. So for me, the plan is step one, and I think if most people just did that for the next 7 days, I think that would be quite eye-opening, and then enough to start stepping it back. Home cooked, fresh meals would be the view there.
Yeah. I think that 7-day test is not to be underestimated as well. It's probably the one first step that I suggest to most people. It's like, look, don't worry about making any changes. Just track everything. And trust me, it's way easier. Like you say, you can just scan barcodes, even if you just weigh stuff. But for the most part, the app is pretty good in being able to say like 1 chicken breast and stuff like that. So even if you just tracked it like that and spent 7 days doing it, for me, like that's the start of the journey. Because after the 7 days, you'll look back on it, and I think most people will realize they're overeating, they're eating too many carbs, and they're eating too much sugar, and they're not eating enough protein, and they're probably eating too many saturated fats, and that just comes through loud and clear for most people. And I think that then becomes a start of the journey for you to go, how if I find out that I'm eating on average 3,500 calories because I tracked it for 7 days, how might I go about eating 2,800 calories? And some of the lessons you learn, like, blimey, I didn't realize like eating a whole pack of nuts was going to be 1,000 calories. It just starts you on that journey of education.
So in that sort of, let's say, sorry. So if you were saying somebody, let's say someone came to you and said, look, I'm really keen to make progress. I want to lose some weight or get healthier, whatever else. Right? So, and you said, right, write down for 7 days. They've got no clue of what they're looking at, right? So they write down calorie numbers. What's their next step what's your advice to them? Like, how are they going to understand what kind of numbers should be, or what would, do you know what I mean? So I think a lot of people, they when we're talking kind of the calorie numbers, I think most people don't really understand the difference between a 3,500 and 2,500 or what that really means. So
yeah, I think that's a good point. But the problem is that is a lot of stuff to try and explain to people. Like you say, there's a lot of gaps in that. That means you may be looking at some stuff you don't quite understand. But for me, rather than try and kind of like understand it all, I think the best thing to do is just to track it. And there are some obvious things that will stand out, right? So, if you look at it and you track it for 7 days, and then you realize your average sugar is 140 grams a day, that should lead you to some education and some research. So you can pop into Google, what would be a good amount of average sugar to eat? And I think that Rich and Lewis, I don't know about you guys, but I try and keep mine under 50. And it doesn't take that long to work out that actually, if you're eating 150 or 200 grams of sugar a day, that's above the average of what the government says you should eat. And it's certainly above the average of what a healthy person should try and consume. And you might look at your calories and it might say, you're eating 3,500 on average over the 7 days. And again, that you might not really know what to do with that. But again, a little bit of Googling, a little bit of reading, a little bit of listening to some podcasts around kind of like calories and stuff like that, you're going to start to get a sense of like someone of your weight, someone of your kind of like, male or female should be eating roughly around this based on how active you are. And again, there's a lot to it, right? And there's probably, loads of episodes off the back of just what we just talked about to go deeper into those things. But I think like you have to start somewhere. You have to have a kind of click where it's like, ooh, I should just gives me kind of like a bit of permission to look into that. So that's why I think just tracking for 7 days and then looking at what you have, and then I think there starts the journey of education, and go from there.
Yep.
I think there's so many things that I want to get into now. You've just opened up so many different topics. So the first one that I'm just going to ask though is, for us, like we do track all our calories like every day, right? And we look at protein and a few other bits and pieces. Do either of you know anyone else that tracks their calories? Because I'm actually sitting here thinking about it. I don't know anyone outside of us three that actually tracks their calories on like MyFitnessPal or anything. And I'm just trying to think, like, in terms of like the do either of you know anyone?
How many users does MyFitnessPal have? Maybe there's only 3 users. There we are.
There's heaps of people in there, and actually, because it's what got me doing it. So I'll share just a funny story. So there's on Instagram, you got a few of these guys that were doing these massive 1 meal a day. So they call it like the OMAD meals, and they were having these obscene like meals. And I was looking at it and I was like, how on earth are they? And they're there with their shirts off or like ripped up. And I'm like, how on earth are they eating all of that? And then they write down, one of the guys was like, check out MyFitnessPal. And then he basically had nothing all day. And he was just focusing on managing his calories on a daily basis. And he would have just this one massive meal that he'd make himself with like some fairly healthier choices. And I was like, oh, wow, that's so interesting. And then I started then getting into the tracking and doing it myself. But I really don't know anyone that does it.
I don't know anybody, but there I think there is the power in it, right? Like,
yeah,
I think, the whole point of this, or the sort of premise behind the podcast is often it requires uncommon behavior to kind of stand apart and make progress and build a better life. And I think that, even if somebody's tracked it and then stepped away from it, you'd be better for it. Even if you didn't continually track it like us in a sort of fairly obsessive way, going through a stage of doing it and then getting some like a sense of where you might educate yourself further, it's only going to, like, I think you would end up eating less and less carbohydrates and more protein and less sugar as a result of just looking at that and then deleting MyFitnessPal, probably. But it might also incentivize you to kind of use it more often and or use it periodically or whatever.
So I think a key message. Yeah, it was a key message. Like, if you want to make some progress, so you've spoken about your goal, Rich, about trying to lose some body fat. If that's what you want, then you need to track your calories, right? There's no other way of actually being able to achieve it. I don't know anyone that would be able to do it unless you're a football player who's playing 5 days a week and burning off how many thousand calories every single week. You could probably get away with eating whatever you like, right? Other than that, and you really need to track it all. I think that's the key message.
Maybe I think we can probably go maybe just a little bit higher level there. There are a few reasons why that's necessary for me as an individual. So age is a big deal, right? 21-year-old me did not need to worry. 41.
Yeah, that's better. Yeah, really good point. Yeah,
there's a shift there naturally, but also you realise that as you get older and you're less able to do the active stuff in the same way, nutrition is way more important. Like, I don't know, if we think about, let's say, a bunch of people who might be listening to us right now, God bless them. They're not at that place, right? Well, actually, I think a lot of people have never had those conversations to understand like the importance of nutrition versus exercise, right? There's a lot of people go, oh, I'm going to go for a run and lose some weight. Let's have a conversation about really what's going to be happening here and what that's going to look like. Don't get me wrong, going for a run is a great idea. But if you want to actually lose weight, and if you are carrying a lot of weight, and especially like, which we've all had careers and we know what this is like, especially when you've got family and whatever else, it's tough. Well, then, nutrition is the most important thing. In my view, I don't know if you can, but for me, nutrition is the most important. What
100%,
you put in your body.
100% agree. Yeah.
And so the ratio of exercise shifts. And so I think there's these stages you have to go through. So I think we're all at a point of where, for us to make progress requires more optimization, because we've been living a particular lifestyle for a fairly long period of time, which means you're now like, we can't just stop eating donuts and lose a kilo because we're not eating donuts. That's done. So, but there's a load of people I don't think that have had education yet already, or they've been busy, or their lifestyle hasn't facilitated it, who actually need to stop at the top of that funnel. And I think pre-tracking, and maybe it's not even necessary until you get to the point where it becomes necessary, like the step one, I think, which I quite like Daniel's kind of summary a little bit, which is kind of like, well, actually, you know what? If you just write down what a week's worth of what you've eaten, just so you have some awareness, you'll probably start seeing some patterns, and you can probably get away with doing that to begin with before you need to get as optimized as some of the stuff we're talking about. Because I think our goals are highly optimized, and therefore our tactics are quite optimized. Whereas there's probably a bunch of people actually who can just make some behavioral changes at the top level and see some benefits. And so I suppose really what I'm kind of saying there is, for anyone who is listening, who is kind of thinking about making a change, nutrition is probably the most important thing actually you should focus on, over getting together a workout plan or a running plan or I'm going to run a half marathon and thinking, well, it's going to change massively. It's like, well, actually, you know what, you're going to get much better results if you get nutrition in check first.
Yeah. Well let's shift on. I think Rich has summarized, like, obviously you're trying to lose fat. For you, it sounds like nutrition is just the key thing to focus on to be able to do that. And the kind of two big things for you are, one, having accurate calorie tracking so that you can achieve that goal. Basically, being organized and ahead of it and planning and not leaving anything to chance. Those sort of things combined are going to give you a good chance of sort of making. Well, I guess as we talk over the next few weeks, we'll see whether that worked.
Yeah, you'll have to give us a progress update.
Hold your account. Absolutely.
I know it's working. I know it's working already, but yeah. Well, Lewis, why don't we shift to you then, in terms of sort of what your goals are over the next month or two, and then what's your kind of like, what's your big focus around nutrition? Like, where are you putting your energy to make it work?
Yeah. So for me, I guess the next 4 weeks, I live in Australia. I live in Sydney. My sister and my nephew have both come out to visit, and they're going to be here for 3.5 weeks, which means that we're going to be going out and sightseeing and doing lots and lots of fun stuff, which means that I'm not going to be able to cook my food or eat everything that I would normally eat quite as easily. So I think the planning bit that Rich has spoken about there comes in for me. So my goal is, I'm actually in a pretty happy space physically where I'm at. If we think like aesthetically, we want to use that. So I feel pretty good. And
you could win a bodybuilding competition. Based on where you're at right now.
I'm not sure if I could win it. I'm not sure if I could win it. I may do all right.
Second.
Yeah. So I'm in pretty good shape right now. So I'd actually say I'm probably in some of the best shape I've ever been in, and I've really dialed in my training and my nutrition. And so my goal for the next 4 weeks, whilst we're going away out and about and doing a lot of stuff, is actually just maintaining what I have, because I do love my food and I love a few beers and I love a dessert. I used to have a really bad relationship with food. Like, I just love it. So for me, it's just maintaining where I'm at without being a bit too gluttonous. And the way in which I'm going to do that is, I know, so similar to Rich, I know my daily maintenance calories is 2,000 calories a day. That means that in order for me to maintain my body weight as it is, I can consume 2,000 calories a day. If I have more than 2,000 calories a day, I am going to gain weight. And more than likely, it's going to be fat of some sort, because if I'm going out and about and eating, it's going to be having a few drinks and a few desserts and other bits and pieces. So it's not like I'm just going to be eating chicken breast. So for me, it's very much focusing on my calories. That is the number one thing. So make sure that I maintain my 2,000 calories a day. But I think something that I would add to that is making sure that my net amount of calories is my maintenance amount. So if I do a cardio session in the morning, so one of my workouts would be a bike session, which I do on the air bike for 60 minutes, I know I burn off 500 calories. So it's in that day not having more than 2,500 calories. And that's going to be my focus for the next 4 weeks. It's making sure that I maintain my weight depending on the activity that I'm doing. So one, the focus is calories. The second bit is also protein. So I don't really look at as many of the other macronutrients. So I won't look at how much sugar I have or how many carbs specifically either. I really just focus on calories, making sure they're a certain level, in protein. So for me, I want to have 150 grams of protein a day, and then my fats and carbs can be whatever they are. So if in a day we're going out and I'm doing a few bits and pieces and we're eating out, as long as I'm getting 150 grams of protein in the day and 2,000 calories, I know I've had a pretty decent day. and I can be fairly flexible around the edges with what that's made up of. So I guess that's pretty much me. And how I'm gonna do that. Sorry, go on. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, actually, just out of interest. So, when you're out and about and you're going to kind of these restaurants, whatever else, like, what's your mindset when you go into that restaurant? So, let's say let's jump for a week, right? So, it's a week's time.
Yep.
You've done your bike session. You know you've kind of got 2,500 calorie ish allowance for the day.
Yep.
You go off into it. You go into a restaurant.
Great question.
Are you just going to what's the mindset? Is it just eat everything? You've got the allowance. Let's just enjoy it, or do you still kind of try and control it? Like how do you
So
go around?
I'll actually give you a perfect example. So yesterday I was in the office yesterday, and I had so I was working yesterday, and we had a big team session. So in the morning, I woke up in the morning and did my workout, which was a weighted vest session. So I did my normal workout, which I would do. I turned up in the morning, and it was an all-day meeting session with my colleagues, and for breakfast there was a whole bunch of pastries. I skipped the pastries. I wasn't going to have the pastries and like the scones and all the other bits and pieces for breakfast, because I knew that we were going out for lunch. And I don't often eat breakfast anyway. So I had something I really enjoy doing is I will get a skinny cappuccino, like a large skinny cappuccino, and that'll be my breakfast. I know it's 110 calories, and actually it ties me over until lunchtime. So I get a bit of protein, I get a few light carbs, it's quite tasty, and that ties me over until lunch. We then went out for lunch, and I had the chicken palmy. So it was like 2 chicken schnitzels and the palmy with like coleslaw. They had ordered garlic bread beforehand. I didn't have any of the garlic bread. I had a Coke Zero, so I wasn't drinking. But I know that meal in itself was 1,000 calories. So I know for the day I've had like 1,200 calories, that and the coffee. And then what else did we do? We went go-karting. It was a pretty active day, actually. And then I got home. My sister was here. My nephew was here. We had a big dinner. But I was really mindful of having meat and veg. So we had some roasted pumpkin, which I know is low calories anyway. My go-to is cottage cheese. So I really like cottage cheese because it's high protein and relatively low calorie as well, and it keeps me full. And I had a whole bunch of chicken. So I then added everything into MyFitnessPal, just kind of see where I was at, and it came up to about 2,400 calories yesterday. But with my workout and my day, I broke even, and I was like, that's a good day. So I went out, I enjoyed the lunch, got home, focused more on the protein side of things and the veg, which are low calorie. Had some sake as well last night though, because they brought me a bottle of sake because they went over to Japan. So I guess that's just how I balanced it out. So one good way of doing it, if we think is like in the morning. So I think you've mentioned this before, Daniel, is around skipping like the breakfast. So I can't entirely fast or skip breakfast. So I do quite like a coffee, and those are kind of my little hacks. I'll have a couple of skinny cappuccinos, like 300 calories, a bit of protein. It just ties me through until lunchtime.
That's a great hack.
Well, look,
like the coffee hack is a great hack.
Mm-hmm.
What I think is interesting about that is it's quite similar to Rich's in a way, which is like the way you just explained your day there. There's so much going on in your head, rearranging pieces based on what's happening, right? Like you're super self-aware of what's happening, and even though perhaps in an example like that, which is a little bit different to like say Rich being at home, you had some things that were coming at you, right, that you couldn't necessarily predict. Like you didn't necessarily know what was on the menu probably at the restaurant. You had to look at it, you had to figure it out. But everything is a very conscious decision, from skipping breakfast through to having your cappuccino as a sort of mitigation kind of tactic, down to like carefully choosing what you had at lunch. All of those things, and then thinking about your dinner, probably like, how do I then fill in the gaps based on what's already been had? And then by the time you've added it all in, you probably took a bit of a chance. Like I feel a bit nervous about adding it all in at the end, because even with how I track things and what I know about it, I can still get a bit off track. But it sounds like that your thought process throughout the day that was happening in the background, which by the way happens for virtually no one else in the world. Like I don't think many people are thinking like that, but it really requires that level of self-awareness and thinking.
It is obsession, isn't it?
A level of consciousness to actually arrive at a set number of calories by the end of the day. I don't think you could do it without it. It's kind of, it was quite a big piece in terms of what Rich said as well.
Yeah, I mean, use
that's
the
right.
word
Talking it out loud, we are so mindful of it.
Yeah, I think Daniel just used the right word, right? Conscious. We're very conscious of what we're eating and how we're behaving around food, which I don't want people thinking means it takes away the enjoyment of it. Like we still have great. I don't know you guys. I still have great meals out on a regular basis, but it's because of 80% of the time I'm very conscious, so therefore I can enjoy the other one, which Daniel I know is like your rule of life, right? So it's kind of
I mean, the schnitzel was delicious, like the schnitzel. But funnily enough, actually, there were 7 of us out. Everyone else got a massive pasta dish because it was like an Italian place, and I just know that would have just made me feel sluggish and tired, and it was like all creamy and like. I actually think the schnitzel with the protein was a slightly better option. So yeah, and the Coke Zeros instead of a couple of beers.
Yeah, cool. Well, look. Also, we can't shift from you onto me until we talk about your carrots, which I kind of say in jest, right? But like again, that's one of your kind of like you have quite a good way of sort of staying on. Like me and Rich laugh at you because I'm like I can't do that, but you have these kind of little ways. It's kind of like your coffees as well, right? Where you have these ways of being able to kind of like fill the gap, but with something that either pushes something out or just replaces something else that would blow things up for you.
Lewis's
hacks. That's a good one. I have a few hacks.
I want it on Instagram. Yeah. Look, I think your Instagram account needs workouts and hacks.
I do have a few hacks. So I think for me, I do enjoy to eat. I do enjoy eating, but I also need to be very aware of what I'm eating. So because 2,000 calories in a day isn't a huge amount. Like when you break it down, 2,000 calories really isn't a lot of calories. So if I am going to be having a lunch out, which is going to be 1,200 calories, that's more than half my calories for the day. So a few things that I do to kind of stave some of that or put that away is I do like carrots. So if I'm feeling really hungry and I've already eaten a fair bit for the day, I will peel myself like 4 or 5 carrots, chop them up and just eat 5 carrots because they're sweet, they're crunchy, they're tasty.
Do you bring them to work? Like in your back pocket?
I don't take. No. So actually, there's another little thing that we can touch on about work around the planning, because I will share something about work, because I'm pretty crazy when I think about it and talk it out loud. So carrots is a good one, and they're actually so tasty. I would like dare anyone to sit down and try and eat 5 carrots. You will feel so full after you've had 5 carrots. So carrots are a good one. Coffees are another one. I really like diet drinks. So when I say diet drinks, so it's like I'll have a Coke Zero, although sometimes I do find it a bit too sweet, but I really like diet tonic water. So if I fancy something a little bit sweet, or if I'm feeling a little bit hungry, I find if I drink sparkling water or some sort of diet tonic-y drink, it does it fills me up and it doesn't make me crave something sugary or sweet. What else what do I do? So in terms of like the work thing that I mentioned, so when I go to work, so I'm in the office 2 days a week. I actually get the same thing every single day, every single time I'm at work. So this is the planning bit that Rich mentioned. There's a big food court down the bottom of where the office is, and there's a place that does grilled chicken with salads, and I just go and get a massive salad with grilled chicken every time I'm there, and it's a really big box of, they have like, I think it's four chicken thighs with a whole bunch of salad, and I know it's not too creamy, it's not too, and it's like, I know it's probably about 800 calories, it's 80 grams of protein, 60 grams of protein, and that ties me over for the day. I take a couple of protein shakes in, so I'm the guy that's at work in the office having a protein shake. I'll take an apple and a banana, and that is pretty much my day's worth of food in the office. A skinny cappuccino, the chicken lunch with salad, I'll have a protein shake and an apple, and then I have dinner, and that keeps me pretty much, and it's the same thing. I'm very routine with what I eat.
I love that. That's so good. Like, nice to hear that, actually. Like, because I think you were giving the impression that I was the nuts one planning, and now it turns out you're the nuts one. So
no, I think we all
do sound more nuts actually now.
Yeah.
Now that you've talked it out, like I put you and Rich on.
It's playing par with each other, I like probably. To eat and whatever else, and taking in 2 protein shakes to the office. That's better.
Yeah. But that's so the thing is, I'll do that. So I'm super strict and focused on but then I'm also, if I'm going out, I'll go out and enjoy it. So that's I think similar to your 80-20 though, right, Daniel? Of just trying to balance it. And when I'm good, I'm good. And when I can control it, I will. When I can't, I'll just enjoy it.
Yeah.
What about you, Daniel? So what's your goal?
Yeah. So, look, my goals are fairly similar to Richard's. I think we're kind of on a fairly similar journey at the moment where we're trying to lean out and we're trying to reach a level of leanness that we're just kind of happy to sit at for a little bit, and then from there we're gonna gain from there. So, over the next 8 weeks, I want to probably lose another 1 or 2 kilograms. I've lost 3.5 over the last kind of 6 or 7 weeks. I don't want to take that too much further because I think I'll eat into too much muscle and probably get too light. But yeah, over the next 8 weeks, losing 1 to 2 kilograms max, nice and slow. That's as an average, that's 0.2, 0.3 a week or something like that. I'd be very happy with that. And I'd like it to be mostly fat. I don't, want to eat into my muscle. In terms of how I measure that, obviously the scale through, the kilograms. I'll look in the mirror and get a good sense of how things are shifting. Again, my very clear visual goal is to have 4 faint abs without a flex and be able to see some of the 5th and the 6th with a flex. And I think that another 1 or 2 kilograms is going to get me there. And, in terms of how I'll measure whether it's mostly fat is really just by my strength. I work in 4-week training blocks. My exercises are fairly standard throughout those. So I'm trying to progress and notch things up a rep or 2. So, as long as I'm not getting weaker and as long as I'm at least kind of staying the same strength and hopefully maybe even adding some strength, I can kind of feel pretty confident that I'm not eating into too much muscle. So that's my goal. If I try and kind of think about a high level approach for achieving that goal, it's very similar. There's a lot of overlap with what you guys mentioned. The first thing is that I know that I need to be in kind of probably somewhere in a kind of like 300 to 400 calorie deficit. And I know that for me, that's about 1900 calories. I'm pretty consistent now. My output is the same in terms of how much I'm training. It's very similar week in, week out. I've been eating 1900 calories as an average for the last 4 or 5 weeks. And I know that's been kind of pulling my weight down on average about half a kilogram a week. So I could feel fairly confident that my maintenance is around 2350, something like that. So consistently eating 1900 calories is going to continue to tick me into the right direction until it doesn't, and then that'll be my maintenance. So yeah, but the high level approach is stick to that kind of 1900, which will give me a 300 to 400 deficit. Prioritize protein. I want that to be kind of around 40%, so somewhere around an average of about 180, 200 max, and that's the macronutrient I care about the most. Like you, Lewis, I'm pretty flexible with the carbs and the fat. Generally, I try and do 40% fat, 20% carbs, but I'm pretty flexible in terms of how that moves around. In fact, I'm happy for it to be a bit more carbs and look like 30-30, just so I can have a bit more energy. And then, I think in terms of how I achieve that, what if I try and think about what's important to me, like how do I get through and be consistent? I think the big change for me since last year and all of the years before it is I would try and approach things in a very perfect way, and the big thing for me is my old goal used to be, I'm going to eat paleo. And anything that is not paleo is a failure or a miss. And I would typically last 1 or 2 days max before failing on that, and then binging for like 2 or 3 days on high calories, processed food, lots of sweets. I have a massive sweet tooth, as Rich, and then, but recently, and it probably only really happened this year, but a little bit last year when I started doing my habit tracking, and I realized that, for habits, 80% felt good enough and I could get results via 80%. And actually the 20% was the flex I needed to be sane. I've been approaching that to my nutrition, and I would say that's pretty foundational now. Like really, as I look over the week, what I'm looking for is 80% to be good food choices. But my calorie is non-negotiable. My average calories are non-negotiable. But in terms of what get eaten around that, 80% should be clean, whole foods, not processed. And then the other 20%, I'm happy for it to be a dessert. I'm happy for it to be, I don't drink, but I'm happy for it to be kind of foods that perhaps don't sit under that process, whole and unprocessed. I'm just happy for that flex. And for the last 6 weeks, for example, I've been doing that 80-20 and I've been able to lose 3 kilograms. Like it totally works as long as I'm 80% really consistent. And then the other 20% is a bit of flex. So kind of thinking about things from an 80 to 20 perspective and giving myself permission to slip 20% at a time as an average over a week. And then looking at everything as an average over the week has stopped me getting so caught up in the detail and then basically ping ponging to just going completely off the wagon with it. So, and then the other thing I'll just chuck in, and you guys can decide where to drill further, is fasting is a daily thing for me. That and is probably as big as the 80-20 thing. I fast every single day, 8, 16. So 16 is fasting is where I fast, and my eating window is typically 8 hours every day, all the time virtually.
I reckon that's a good one to dive into, the fasting. So how did you initially go about doing that? Because I know that I get particularly hungry at a certain point in the day. So when do you first start eating? When do you stop eating? What do you do when you're feeling really hungry to kind of try and stave off? What does your first meal look like? Is it like a really big meal? Is it an easy meal? How do you have like 2 meals after? You have so just how that all kind of works out.
Yeah, it's fell into something pretty consistent and standard now. So I typically, like I said, my fasting window is 8 hours, and I'm flexible on it. It's not like always 12 till 8 or always 2 till 10. I tend to take a note of when I eat the day before, and then from there, I let it go 16 hours. So if I eat quite late, say 10 o'clock, then I know that I can't eat anything until 2 o'clock the next day. Typically, I'll eat around 8:30, 9ish, so I know that somewhere around kind of 1ish I can eat. But yeah, it's never have any breakfast. My first meal of the day is typically about 1 or 2 p.m. And that will be a kind of high protein, low carb, kind of medium, kind of fat type of meal. So it might look like, some chicken, some vegetables, some nuts, or a steak and some vegetables, something like that. In the afternoon, I have a small kind of afternoon snack, mainly just because if I just have lunch and just dinner, it's quite hard to hit my protein goals. So in the afternoon, I'll have a protein shake and some high protein Greek yogurt, which will give me another 50-60 grams of protein. And then by then I'm walking into an evening meal with enough calories to spare, and knowing that I've only got to eat, probably a normal amount of protein because I've won already mostly on the protein. And that will take me to my calories. So yeah, it's basically 3 meals, like 3 eating periods a day, a medium size high protein lunch, a high protein, like a small high protein snack around 3 or 4, about kind of 4 or 5 p.m. And then, a pretty normal dinner around 7 or 8 p.m.
And when are you working out? Just like, hey, I suppose fasting is such a massive topic anyway, but for you, if you're fasting every day, when are you getting your workouts in, and do you find that has any impact?
Not now. It did. So to Lewis's question, I think that when you try and shift to using fasting on a regular basis, there's a bit of a steep curve. Not even a steep curve to it, but like it's going to feel weird. You're going to feel hungry, typically when you would normally eat breakfast, and you just kind of have to power through it. Same goes for the training as well. The first time I could sometimes train at kind of like 7 or 8 in the morning. Other times I can train at like 12 or 1, always before my eating window. And I found that quite hard to train in a fasted state to start with. But it probably takes like 1 or 2 months of you just saying, look, just not eating for the morning is not the biggest thing in the world. Like it's probably is for people that just eat from the get-go and just start eating throughout the day, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not that hard. It's just like anything else. You have to get a little bit used to it, and then after a while, like where I am now, and I think you can achieve this in 1 or 2 months. Again, it just takes a bit of willpower and a bit of getting used to. I'm rarely, it's what we now 12:19. I'm not hungry at all. I could probably push on until dinner time if I really felt like it, but that's just because I've got used to it. And again, I could very easily train now and be totally fine with it. But, it just takes a bit of getting used to it. And I think just like anything, you have to power through, the hunger kind of feelings you get and just pay attention to them and not eat in the morning. And, and Rich, I know you found this as well. It's like you struggled with training in a fasted fashion to start with, right? And then you kind of got used to it over 1 or 2 months. I know you don't do it every single time like me, but for the, when you do it, it's gotten easier over time, right?
Yeah, sorry. I mean, it was you that introduced me. You introduced me to fasting. Actually, it was something which I know you've been a big advocate of for a long time. And yeah, it took me 8 weeks to kind of get comfortable with it. And now I'm at a place where I do it on and off. So I'm fasting today. So I'm not eating anything yet. And I trained this morning and pretty intense session and absolutely fine. I'm not even hungry, but it comes to those hacks, right? Like I had a coffee this morning before the workout, like just a normal black coffee, and I feel fine. I don't feel hungry, but it did take a couple of months to get used to. Like, wow, I was hangry that first month. I just really found it hard. And then what I found for me, if I'm doing a workout session that involves like heavy lifting, my performance is definitely better if I've had carbohydrates beforehand. So I'd have porridge, which is one of my go-tos. It's one of my go-tos. A big bowl of porridge in the morning with like banana and berries, and it's just like me. It's like a breakfast of gods. And
sounds,
then
I
work out like
to me.
yeah. Like, so I do that, and then I work out like an hour later. I'm at least maybe 10, 15%, maybe even 20% higher level of performance. And so for me in that situation, it doesn't make sense to be fasted. Like I just have a better workout. Whereas today was a cardio hit session, which actually I don't notice a difference. Now, I don't know why that is. It's just obviously maybe unique to me, but that was my thing with fasting. So Danny, you introduced me to it. I use it as a tool now to like, to control my calorie intake and metabolic freedom, rather than it being, I think you use it slightly differently where I don't do it every day.
Something funny I just want to add there, by the way. So your like luxury treat breakfast is a bowl of porridge. My wife said to me, she heard this the other day. She's like, Rich's like treat is porridge, and he does that just because he's gonna do like a heavy workout. She's like, I just have that for breakfast every day. She's like, that's just my breakfast. For him, it's a treat. So it just gotta like, it's true. Like when we're talking about these things, that's just how we like think about it to that nth degree. I was going to ask you though, Daniel. So with your fasting,
so look, just super quickly, because I think I think if somebody was going to try fasting, they should try it like Rich kind of tried it. Like, try to go into fasting and just doing it every day for a week. Like, it's a harsh thing to jump straight into. It's like you have to really think about how to reorganize your life. Sometimes it might be like, I don't have breakfast with the family anymore. It's super harsh, right? So I would say that just, and also it doesn't have to be 16-8, right? You could just say, you know what, for one day a week for the next month, I'm just going to not eat until midday. And the important thing is to kind of like notice kind of the hunger, but also just don't act on it. And 9 times out of 10, it will fade away. And it teaches you a really important lesson around your relationship with food, which we can get into in a second, because like one of the reasons why I fast is because I have a fairly bad relationship with food. And it's the biggest thing probably I've found to be able to stay on track and stick to how much I'm eating and et cetera, et cetera. But, I think if people wanted to kind of actionable step, that would be it. It's just like, just pick a day a week where you feel you can do it, where you haven't got much going on in the morning, and just say, I'm not going to eat till midday. And you might find it tricky-ish the first day. And then the next week, you'll find it a little bit easier. And then all of a sudden, you're fasting one day a week till midday. And then from there, you can decide where you want to take it. You might decide to push it to 2 p.m. and say, I wonder if I can really do a strict kind of like 16-8. Or you might decide, I'm going to do this 2 days a week. And who knows where you get to it. You might get to where I am, where, 80% of the time, I'm 16-8. That's quite different to where Rich landed with it, and it's quite different to probably where you are, Lewis. But that's where I would say like is a good starting point, and then from there you figure out what's right for you.
So what do you have whilst you're fasting?
Black coffee and water only. But basically the general it seems the general rule is that anything that has a calorie in it is going to cause your metabolism to start working, your body to start processing it. So obviously black coffee, which is pretty much just water with some coffee, as well as like just water, are pretty much the only things you can really have. I mean, again, it depends on why you're using fasting, which actually gets me back to the reason of why I use fasting, right? I use fasting to control my calories. Yeah, it's a strategy to control my calories. That's the only reason I use it. Like there's a lot of kind of like biological benefits to fasting. But I think most of those usually only kick in if you're doing it for kind of 2 or 3 days. I think on a typical kind of 16-hour fast, 8-hour eating windows, you probably don't get a lot of the biological benefits. So actually, when you think about it like that, you don't have to be so bent out of shape. Maybe if there's like, you mentioned your little 100-calorie coffee or something like that, like it's probably okay. I'm a bit weird like the both of you, whereas like I can't live with myself if it's just not a strict fast, because I like it to be. So that's why I only have coffee. And I used to drink a lot of cups of tea in the morning, until I realized that, well, 5 or 6 splashes of milk throughout the morning is not fasting. And even though it doesn't really make any difference, because I'm not looking for the biological benefits of fasting, I'm looking for the strategy to control calories. I'm just like, I would prefer it to be clean. I know I'm 100% strictly fasting. And then I know I just have an 8-hour window to control my calories. And again, that's probably the primary reason that I fast. I have in the past quite a bad relationship with food. Like when I used to wake up in the morning and I would look to see what to eat because I just was hungry. Not even hungry, I just was probably addicted to just eating stuff that tasted good. And then from there, my appetite goes into complete overdrive and I'm just looking to see what to eat. And there's a lot of like mental gymnastics going on in the background about, should I eat this? No, don't eat that. That's stupid. No, you can eat that. Oh, and like it's kind of like it's just not very good background noise to be having. But unfortunately, that is the person I am. So for me, I have found that if I push away that, it's not a thing. I'm not eating till 2:00. There's no should I eat this? Should I eat that? There's no I'm going to eat this, and therefore it now means I'm going to eat this, and my hunger's died. I'm like, no, it's not a thing. I do not eat until 2, and then for the most part, the shorter your window for eating, the less trouble I will get into. And I was telling Rich a story yesterday, right? I was on a leadership offsite on Monday and I decided to have some breakfast. And I had like, just to fit in. And I just felt like it. Like I'm not like 100%, I'm like 80%. And I pick my little 20% quite carefully. But it was about 9 a.m. and I had a little bit of yogurt and some granola and a couple of poached eggs. And I felt like that's fine. I know I can then have like a smaller late lunch and a dinner. And I knew how everything would fit around it. But I sit down and start working and I'm like, man, I'm hungry. And there were some really great cookies that I saw. And, maybe I could just have a cookie and then I can work around that. Because if I just have a cookie, I know it's probably got a couple 150 calories in it, 50 carbs. I'll be okay. I could fit that in. But I'm like, shut up. Just keep working and get a decaf tea and just try and starve it away. Like, give yourself something to drink. And for like between 9 a.m. and lunch, all I was thinking about was food. And that's just because I started the process earlier, and that's a unique thing to me. I think I don't think everybody is like that. Rich is someone who seems to be able to have his treat porridge for breakfast and then eat again later lunch.
Treat porridge. Jesus.
Hasn't got all of that. Hasn't got all of that going on, right? But I can't do it because I get into too much trouble, and it's just who I am. So I prefer to I use fasting really primarily as a strategy to keep my hunger and appetite under control and to help my bad relationship with food and just to compress the window. And then I feel like I know that has meant I can be very effective at staying within my calorie target.
Good insights. And it took you 1 to 2 months.
I don't know how to handle this situation, but I've got to just hang on. I've got someone at the door banging loads. Give me a second.
Go
for it.
We'll decide. We can either leave it in and or we'll cut it out. Who knows?
Because I was doing that quite regularly. And then on the weekends, what I found is that the weekends I'd go out for breakfast with the kids and we'd all go out for breakfast and I'd have breakfast. And then I just found it difficult to get back into the routine again of doing it because I wasn't doing it that consistently. And I just find, so it's something that if you're doing consistently, you're just in a groove and it's comfortable.
Yeah,
but whenever I'd break it, and then the weekends, and then on the Monday, I wouldn't be able to get, and then I'd try again on Tuesday, Wednesday, and then I'd fall back again on the weekend. So for me, it was just I just need to be more mindful, and that kind of works for me.
Yeah, or just decide the balance that you want, right? Like it's okay to be inconsistent with it. Actually, if you look at how Rich uses fasting, he does exactly that. I guess
he does it that way.
2 or 3 days a week in which he does it, and he does it strategically to make sure that he can, have some carbs and have his big cheap porridge for breakfast.
What is this cheap porridge thing going on now?
Like he knows he's good for a, he's good for a workout, right? And that's perfectly fine. I tend to take it to a much more extreme level because I have different problems I'm trying to solve with it, but. I think Rich's approach is actually probably best. Like if you listen to a lot about how people use fasting and the sort of concept of metabolic flexibility, it's probably good not to get stuck in one thing and for your body to rely on that one thing all of the time. So I know that by doing it 80% at a time and having a bit of 20% flex is probably not enough flex for that flexibility. I think how Rich is using it is probably the better way. But again, if I could use it like Rich, I would. Just like if I could have 2 glasses of wine a week, I would. But for me, I have to solve some things in a harsher way to kind of like just put it to bed.
I think that's an important point. Do what works for you as well. Yeah.
There is a devil here, right? Which I bet another interesting topic for the future, which is around willpower. Like, I had a crash course in this when I was diagnosed with this autoimmune condition. I had to suddenly go off sugar. Like, that was I had to get off sugar, and almost literally immediately. And so I ended up having this kind of period of like very quick rewiring, where anything that was a carbohydrate or a sugar that could cause me problems, inflammation issues, I had to see it as like a toxic thing. And so I had like this kind of almost like a rewiring, where I don't think you've gone through that yet, Daniel. So your kind of thing there is a willpower thing, that cookie. In my head, that's toxic to me, so I won't touch it. So, but it took me a while to go through that process. And so I think there's like a willpower thing there, which is, I think, sounds like how you're using fasting a little bit, which is, hey, if you know you can't eat anything until that time, it's irrelevant what that food is, whether it be a cookie or anything. It's like, well, I can't eat until 2, so therefore you've got like a barrier. It's like a willpower control. I don't have that issue anymore, but that was because I had to go through something else a couple of years ago, which means I've just built that willpower thing where, like, if we walk in, let's say we were together, we walk into a coffee shop and there's a bunch of pastries. And Daniel, I know you sent me numerous photos over the years where, like, look, all these pastries, I can't have any of them. I've got my willpower. See, I don't have that issue because I know I can't eat them because in my head they are toxic. So, whereas previously, as you would know, I would quite happily have a little cheeky pastry or a little cake with a cup of tea. So, I think the fasting thing there, I'm able to have that flexibility because I don't have the willpower problem anymore because I solved it for another reason. Yeah. I think you're also using that as a way of kind of, controlling that willpower mechanism, which I think is actually what plagues most people. And actually, if you were to look at, I don't know about you guys, but if you go to any coffee shop or petrol station or anything, like you go and buy a cup of coffee, you don't see healthy snacks in front of you, right? It's always hard work, it's a nightmare. And so if you even have the pang of any kind of hunger, the default response there, unless you're kind of really tuned in, is you're just going to go, you know what, I'll just have a little thing, or have a sliced lemon cake or a Bakewell tart or whatever it might be. So that I think the way you're using fasting suits you, but I think it's actually doing more than just the calorie control. I think there's an element of stopping willpower, kind of willpower failures.
Well, it just sort of takes it off the table, right? But I think that's probably the interesting theme across this podcast. Like, me and you, Rich, have solved that problem in 2 different ways. You've solved it by rewiring and reframing what those foods are for you because of the autoimmune condition, etc. Whereas for me, I've solved it. Like, I wish I could kind of solve it in that way, but they still sound delicious to me. Like, even though I know they're toxic, so I've solved it with
You're still there.
But if you think about,
he's back. He's back.
Oh, yeah. He's back.
Okay. Did I? What I was basically saying is that, like, I think we've solved it in 2 different ways. You've seen that as toxic because of your diagnosis, etc. Whereas for me, they still sound super lovely, and I can't see them as a toxic thing. I'm like, no, they just sound great. But therefore, the fasting thing takes it off the table because it doesn't fucking matter whether. Sorry for swearing, Lewis. His child can't watch this podcast now. For me, it doesn't matter whether it's toxic or not or whatever. It's like, it's not a thing because it's not in my eating window. So, like, I'm just taking it off the table. You just took it off the table in a different way. And if you think back to how we've all talked about our goals and our nutrition, there is a common thread amongst, there is actually really just one, there's more than one common thread, but the biggest common thread is really food intake and control. Like, you're not really going to achieve your goals unless you understand how much you're eating and you can control it. There's other things like protein and stuff like that. That's a very common thread between us. But the number one thing is calorie tracking and understanding, like, choosing how much you eat to achieve your goal. But then outside of that, there is some overlap and there's some complete differences, right? Fasting is something that I do. Rich, how you reframed your mind, like, Lewis, your hacks, etc. Like, we all like have a bit of a bias around certain things that work for us, and that's really what it's about. Really, is there's so many different strategies and tactics, but I think at the heart of it really is that calorie control, and then around it, you sort of got to find what works for you to be able to be successful within it. And there's probably like there's probably like 100 different podcasts we could do around all of those things, which hopefully we will do to break them down.
Yeah.
I say, I think that is like the perfect summary. Well said, Daniel.
I fearless leader.
What were you going to say, Rich? Slightly controversial.
Well, I mean, I don't know you guys, but there are people out there, and podcasts which you can listen to. I don't put names on these ones because of what I'm going to say, but they are a bit controversial where they say that calories don't matter. It's just about the quality of food that you're eating. For me personally, over the last while, experimenting myself, they do matter to me. The amount of food I eat is directly relatable to how I feel and look, both in feel as in energy and availability of kind of like mental kind of focus, physical kind of capability in the gym, whatever. And then look wise, if my calories bloat to 3,500-4,000 calories, which is very easy to do for a couple of weeks, I see it pretty obviously in the mirror. So for me, it is it does make a difference, the amount of food that I'm consuming. But I know that kind of there are kind of a few people out there that are trendy right now on the podcast scene where they're saying, "Oh, calories don't make a difference."
Let's shame them. Who are they? Let's get them out.
I'm not.
Who are they?
I don't think.
Who are the people talking nonsense?
Well, it's funny because they're PhDs and very smart people, and I can't argue with them on regards to their scientific research or whatever else. I'm just going my personal view on what's happened to me as an individual, which is the only thing I can stand over in those regards. It's important to me, and it's made a difference.
Same.
Yep, same. Cool. Okay. Well, look, what I'll do from both of you as well is I'll get a few resources, because I know, like, whether it comes to fasting or calorie control, like we can link to a few things that are interesting, like the 2 apps we mentioned. Mm-hmm. I could always pronounce the name incorrectly, but I think it's Thomas DeLure, right? As somebody that actually has 1 or 2 videos that are fantastic around fasting in terms of introducing the concept of fasting and how to go about it. So, maybe link a few things in the show notes, and hopefully people find it useful. And then over the next few weeks, we'll break down some of these other bigger topics as well.
That's good.
Sounds good.
Gents, great to see you.
All right, cool.
Good catch up.
And I'm going to go and break my fasting window.
I'm going to go eat some carrots.
And my porridge is only a treat because it has honey on it, by the way. That's the only reason it's a treat, because I don't have sugar apart from the honey in my porridge.
Got to have a bit of honey on it.
Honey's the hack. All right, cool.
Yeah. All right, guys.
Cheers. Catch you guys later.